Kael had chosen the outer rim of the neutral colony for one simple reason. Nothing ever happened there. The transport lanes were quiet, the comm traffic barely worth listening to, and even the occasional malfunctioning drone had the decency to break down somewhere else. It was, in his professional opinion, the perfect environment for a man who preferred machines to people and predictable failures to unpredictable conversations. His home was small, functional, and filled with parts that would make most engineers either impressed or deeply concerned. Wires curled across the walls like metallic vines. Panels hummed softly with contained energy, and a half-disassembled plasma regulator occupied his table, patiently waiting for Kyle to remember what he had intended to fix. He sat there now, leaning back in his chair, staring at the regulator as if it might confess its problems if given enough time. It did not. Uncooperative, Kyle muttered, tapping it lightly with a tool. Typical. Outside, the night stretched across the colony in a quiet, dim glow, interrupted only by the faint pulse of distant station lights. Kyle liked it this way. No noise, no interruptions. No? A sound broke through the silence. It was faint, a dull, uneven thud, like something hitting the ground with far less grace than intended. Kyle froze, one eyebrow lifting slightly as he listened. The sound came again, softer this time, followed by a brief scraping noise. He exhaled slowly. "Of course something happens," he said to no one in particular, setting his tool down. "I say one thing. The universe hears it, immediately decides to prove me wrong." He stood, brushing dust from his hands, and made his way to the door. The sensors flickered as they registered his presence, the panel sliding open with a quiet hiss. Cool air drifted inside, carrying with it the scent of metal and distant energy discharge. Kael stepped out. At first he saw nothing unusual, just the familiar stretch of worn ground and scattered debris that marked the colony's edge. Then his gaze shifted slightly to the left. There, a few meters from his door, something lay partially in shadow. Kael did not move immediately. Years of working with unstable systems had taught him the value of caution. He leaned forward just slightly, squinting. It was a person, or at least it looked like one. They were curled slightly on the ground, motionless, their outline barely visible in the dim light. Kyle frowned. People did not simply collapse outside his home. It was inconsiderate. "Hello?" he called, his voice calm but edged with suspicion. "If you're here to cause problems, I'd appreciate a warning in advance." No response. Kyle sighed. "Well, that's not reassuring." He stepped closer, each movement measured. As he approached, the details became clearer. A young woman, at least she appeared to be, her features soft, her form slight. Her clothing was unfamiliar, fabric layered in a way that suggested it served more than just decoration. There was a faint glow beneath her skin, subtle and flickering, like a system struggling to maintain power. Kyle crouched beside her, studying her face. "Definitely not from around here," he murmured. Then he noticed her ears. They were longer than they should have been. Not dramatically so, but enough to make it very clear that she was not human. They curved slightly, elegant and sharp, as if designed with intention rather than evolution. Kyle leaned back slightly, considering. "All right," he said after a moment. "So either you're an alien, or I've been working too long without sleep." He paused. "Could be both." The girl did not move. Her breathing was shallow, uneven. Whatever had brought her here, it had not been gentle. Cal glanced around, half expecting someone, or something, to emerge from the darkness. Nothing did. The colony remained quiet, indifferent. He looked back at her. This, he decided, was a problem. A very inconvenient, very unexpected problem. He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I fix machines," he said, as if explaining the situation to her unconscious form. "That's my job. I don't fix people or aliens or whatever category you fall into." She remained silent. Kyle waited a moment, then nodded slightly as if she had made a compelling argument. "Good point," he said. "You're already here." Carefully, he reached out, placing 2 fingers against her wrist. The pulse was there, faint but steady enough to suggest she was not about to stop existing immediately. That was, in Kael's experience, a positive sign. "All right," he muttered. Not broken beyond repair. He stood, then hesitated. This is a bad idea, he added. Then, with the quiet resignation of a man who already knew he was going to ignore his own advice, he bent down and lifted her. She was lighter than he expected. That's not comforting, he said under his breath, adjusting his grip. Usually lighter things are either fragile or explosive. Hoping for fragile, he carried her inside, the door sliding shut behind him as the controlled hum of his home wrapped around them once more. The lights adjusted automatically, casting a soft glow over the room. Kael set her down on the nearest surface that was not actively occupied by machinery, which after a brief search turned out to be a narrow resting bench near the wall. He stepped back, crossing his arms as he studied her. Well, he said after a moment, welcome to my home. A pause. Please don't break anything. The girl did not respond. Kael nodded once, as if that settled things. Good, he said. We understand each other. Kael did not sleep much that night, which was unusual, because he normally treated sleep as a sacred agreement between himself and the universe, one that he rarely allowed to be interrupted. Unfortunately, the universe had apparently decided that a silent, mysterious alien girl lying on his bench counted as a valid exception. He sat at his work table, pretending to focus on the plasma regulator, while his attention drifted back to her every few seconds. The faint glow beneath her skin had stabilized, no longer flickering erratically, but pulsing in a steady rhythm, like a system that had finally found a stable current. Kael considered that a good sign, although he had no idea what kind of system it actually was. Could be a biological energy core, he muttered, adjusting a dial on the regulator without looking at it. Or just, very enthusiastic blood circulation. He glanced over again. She hadn't moved. That somehow was more unsettling than if she had. Kael leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. You're going to wake up eventually, he said, preferably in a non-destructive way. Silence answered him. He tapped the regulator once more, then immediately frowned. You're distracting me, he added, pointing vaguely in her direction, as if she were responsible for his inability to fix anything. Another stretch of quiet passed before something changed. It was subtle at first, a shift in her breathing, a slight tension in her fingers. Kael noticed immediately, because of course he did. He straightened, watching closely as her eyelids fluttered. Well, he said under his breath, here we go. Her eyes opened slowly. They were not glowing, not strange or unnatural, but there was something in them that felt deeper than they should have been, like looking into a system with too many layers to understand at once. She blinked, her gaze unfocused at first, then gradually sharpening as she took in her surroundings. She turned her head slightly. Her eyes landed on Kael. They stared at each other. Kael raised one hand in a small, polite gesture. Hello, he said. You're currently not outside, which is an improvement. She did not respond. Instead, she sat up abruptly. Kael flinched, instinctively stepping back. All right, he said quickly. Fast movement, that's fine. We can work with fast movement, preferably not aggressive fast movement. She looked around the room, her gaze moving from one object to another with precise, almost calculated curiosity. The wires, the panels, the tools. Everything seemed to catch her attention for exactly a second longer than normal. Then her eyes returned to him. There was no fear in them. That was unexpected. Okay, Kael said slowly. You're either very calm, very confused, or you've decided I'm not a threat. I'm going to choose to believe the third option. It makes me feel better. She tilted her head slightly. It was a small motion, but it carried a strange weight, as if she were analyzing him in a way he couldn't quite follow. Kael crossed his arms. If you're trying to figure out what I am, I assure you, the answer is disappointing. No response. He sighed. Right, communication. That would be useful. He gestured toward himself. Kael, he said clearly. That's me. I fix things. Mostly things that don't want to be fixed. He paused, then pointed gently toward her. You? She blinked. For a moment, Kael thought she might speak. Instead, she looked down at her own hands, turning them slightly as if examining them for the first time. Her fingers moved slowly, deliberately, like someone testing a system after a long shutdown. Then she looked back at him. Still silent. Kael waited and waited. All right, he said eventually. We're going with the quiet approach. I respect that. I also prefer it, in theory. In practice, it's slightly inconvenient. He turned, grabbing a small container from his table and placing it on a nearby surface. Inside was water, filtered, clean, and definitely not hazardous, which was one of his better achievements. He pushed it gently toward her. Drink, he said. It's safe. Mostly. I haven't tested it on whatever you are, but I've tested it on me, and I'm still here. She watched him for a moment and then reached out. Her movements were careful, precise. She picked up the container, studying it briefly before bringing it to her lips. She drank slowly, her expression unchanged, but something about the way she did it suggested she was cataloging the experience. Kael nodded. Good, he said. Step 1, hydration. Very advanced process. She lowered the container, still holding it as she looked at him. Another long pause. Kael shifted slightly. You're not going to say anything, are you? Silence. He nodded again. That's fair. If I woke up in a place like this, I'd probably also question my life choices. Her gaze lingered on him for a moment longer, then drifted toward the room again. This time her attention settled on the plasma regulator. She stood. Kael immediately raised a hand. Careful, he said. That one bites. She ignored him, which Kael noted was already a strong personality trait. She approached the regulator, crouching slightly as she examined it. Her fingers hovered over the exposed components, not touching, just observing. Kael watched, curious despite himself. You're interested in broken things too? He asked. That's either a good sign or a very bad one. She reached out. Her fingers made contact with the regulator. For a second, nothing happened. Then the device hummed. Not the unstable, irritated hum it had been producing earlier, but a smooth, steady sound, as if something inside it had suddenly aligned perfectly. Kael froze. No, he said softly. That's not how that works. The regulator's lights flickered, then stabilized completely. Zara, though he did not yet know her name, pulled her hand back slightly, studying the result with quiet focus. Kael stepped closer, staring at the device. It was fixed. Not partially, not temporarily, completely. He looked at her. She looked at him. Another long pause settled between them. Kael exhaled slowly, then gestured toward the regulator. I've been working on that for 3 days, he said. You touched it for 3 seconds. She blinked. He nodded once, very seriously. I'm going to assume you have no idea how impressive that is, because otherwise I'd have to be offended. For a brief moment, just a flicker, something changed in her expression. Not quite a smile, but close enough that Kael noticed. And for the first time since he had found her outside his door, he had the distinct feeling that whatever had entered his quiet, predictable life was not going to leave it unchanged. The first word she ever said came 3 days later, and it was not particularly impressive. No, Kael stared at her, holding a tool in midair as if time itself had paused to witness the moment. No, he repeated, as though confirming the word had truly escaped her. She nodded once calmly. He lowered the tool very slowly. I've been speaking to you for 3 days, he said. Full sentences, occasionally very thoughtful ones, and you open with no. That feels, targeted. She watched him without apology. Kael pointed at the half-disassembled energy relay in front of him. You were supposed to hand me that connector, he said. No, she repeated, a little firmer this time. He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. You know, most people start with something simple. Hello. Who are you? Why is everything here slightly concerning? But no, you went straight to rejection. Bold. She tilted her head slightly, considering him. Then after a brief pause, she picked up the connector and handed it to him. Kael blinked. You said no, he pointed out. She looked at the connector, then at him, as if evaluating the concept of consistency. No, she said again. He took the connector anyway. I'm choosing to interpret that as progress. The days settled into something resembling a routine, though Kael refused to officially acknowledge it as such. The girl, who still had not provided a name, moved through his home with a quiet familiarity that grew more natural with each passing hour. She watched everything, learned quickly, sometimes too quickly. Kael had stopped being surprised when she fixed things without tools. He was not happy about it, but he had stopped being surprised. "You're doing it again," he said one afternoon, standing behind her as she hovered over a malfunctioning interface panel. "You're looking at it like it's going to apologize and repair itself out of shame." She didn't respond. Her fingers hovered over the panel, not touching, just close enough that the faint glow beneath her skin became visible again. The panel flickered. Cal narrowed his eyes. "Don't," he warned. She touched it. The panel stabilized instantly, its display clearing into perfect alignment. Kyle exhaled through his nose. "That's deeply offensive to my profession." She turned slightly, looking at him. For a second, he thought she might say something else. Instead, she gestured toward the panel, then toward him. "You," she said. He frowned. "Yes, that's me. I've been here the whole time." She shook her head slightly, then pointed again. "You fix." Kyle paused. Then slowly, a small smile pulled at the corner of his mouth. "I do fix," he agreed. "That's kind of my entire personality." She watched him carefully as if storing the information somewhere important. "Kyle," she said. He blinked. "That's new," he said. "You've upgraded from no to using my name. This is a significant development." She nodded once, satisfied. Kyle leaned against the table, crossing his arms. "So you can talk. You just choose not to most of the time." She did not deny it. "That's fair," he said. "If I had the option, I'd probably reduce my conversations by at least 50%. A quiet moment passed between them. Then she looked at him again, her expression shifting slightly, something more focused settling in her gaze. "Kyle," she repeated. He raised an eyebrow. "Yes?" She hesitated. It was subtle, but noticeable. The way her fingers tightened slightly at her side, the way her eyes flickered for just a moment as if searching for something beyond the room. Then she spoke. "Zara." Kel went still. He straightened slightly, the name settling into the space between them. "Zara," he repeated. She nodded. He let out a slow breath. "All right," he said. "That's good. Names are useful. They make things feel less like I accidentally adopted a mysterious alien entity." Zara blinked at him. He waved a hand. "Not adopted. That was a figure of speech. You're free to leave whenever you want. Preferably not through anything expensive." She glanced toward the door, then back at him. She did not move. Cal watched her for a moment, then nodded once. "Right," he said. "Staying is also an option." Zara stepped closer to the table, her attention returning to the scattered components. She picked up a small device, one Kyle had been meaning to repair for weeks, and turned it over in her hands. "Broken," she said. Kyle gave a short laugh. "Yes, that tends to be the theme around here." She looked at the device, then at him. "Fix." He pointed at himself. "That's my job." She shook her head slightly, then raised the device. Before he could say anything, she pressed her fingers lightly against it. The faint glow returned. The device hummed. And just like that, it worked. Kyle closed his eyes briefly. "I'm going to start charging you rent," he said. "If you're going to outperform me in my own home, there should be some kind of compensation." Zara looked at him, her expression unreadable. Then very faintly, almost imperceptibly, she smiled. It was small, quick, gone almost as soon as it appeared. But Kael saw it, and for reasons he couldn't quite explain, it felt more significant than anything she had repaired so far. He exhaled slowly, shaking his head. "This is going to be a problem," he muttered. Zara tilted her head. He gestured toward her, then around the room. "You," he said, "fixing things, staying here, not explaining anything. That combination usually leads to complications." She considered his words. Then after a moment, she spoke again. "No." Kyle stared at her. Then he laughed. "Of course," he said. "Should have expected that answer." Time passed in a way Kael had never quite trusted, quietly, without asking permission, and with the subtle habit of rearranging things while no one was paying attention. Days turned into weeks, weeks into something less measurable, and somewhere in that unremarkable stretch of time, Zara became part of the place as if she had always been there. Kael noticed it in small, inconvenient ways. His tools were no longer where he left them, but they were somehow always easier to find. Systems that used to hum with mild irritation now ran with suspicious efficiency. Even the old door panel, which had required a precise, almost ritualistic tap to open, started responding on the first try. He did not like that. "This is unnatural," he said one morning, staring at the door as it slid open without resistance. It had character before. Zara stood nearby, holding a container of something that had once been tea and was now different. "You fixed it," Kyle added, narrowing his eyes. She nodded. "I didn't ask you to fix it." She tilted her head. Kyle pointed at the door. "That panel and I had an understanding. It resisted. I insisted. It eventually gave in. That's a relationship." Zara looked at the door, then back at him. "Better," she said. Kyle sighed. "Yes. Functionally better, emotionally worse." She handed him the container. He accepted it cautiously, glancing inside. The liquid was clear, with a faint shimmer that suggested it might have opinions of its own. "What did you do to this?" he asked. Zara considered the question. "Ego improved." Kyle stared at it. "That's what worries me." He took a careful sip, paused, then blinked. "That is actually better," he admitted, sounding mildly offended. "I don't like that." Zara watched him, and there it was again. That almost smile, quiet and brief. It happened more often now. Not enough to call it frequent, but enough that Kael had started to notice patterns. She spoke more too, though always in short, precise fragments, as if each word had to justify its existence before being used. And yet, for all the small changes, there were things that hadn't changed at all, like the way she sometimes stopped mid-task, her attention drifting somewhere beyond the walls. Her long ears would angle slightly, catching something Kael couldn't hear. Her expression would grow distant, not sad, not afraid, just elsewhere. Kyle pretended not to notice, at least at first. "All right," he said one evening, setting down a tool with a quiet clink. "You do that thing again." Zara looked up from the device in her hands. "That thing," he repeated, gesturing vaguely toward her face. "The staring, the listening to something that isn't there. It's becoming a pattern, and I don't like patterns I don't understand." She was silent for a moment. Then she looked toward the ceiling. "Far," she said. Kyle followed her gaze, frowning. "Far," he repeated. "That's not very specific." She hesitated, searching. "Calling," she added. Kyle's expression shifted slightly. He leaned back against the table, crossing his arms. "Something is calling you," he said, "from far away." Zara nodded. He was quiet for a moment, processing. Then he exhaled. "That sounds like a problem," he said. She did not disagree. Kyle rubbed the back of his neck. "You're not planning to suddenly disappear one day, are you?" he asked. "Because I'd like at least a small warning, preferably written, in clear language." Zara looked at him. There was something in her expression now, something more grounded, more certain. "No," she said. Kyle studied her for a second longer than necessary. Then he nodded once. "Good," he said. "I prefer problems I can see coming." Zara returned her attention to the device, but her movements were slower now, more thoughtful. Outside, the colony remained quiet, too quiet. Cal didn't notice it immediately, because silence was what he had always wanted. But there was a difference between natural quiet and the kind that settled in like a held breath. The usual distant hum of traffic had faded. The faint signals that normally passed through his systems were gone. He frowned, turning slightly toward the wall panel. "That's odd," he muttered, tapping a control. The display flickered to life, scanning the surrounding area. Nothing. No ships, no transmissions, no movement. Kyle narrowed his eyes. "That's not normal," he said. Zara looked up. He gestured toward the panel. "The colony doesn't just stop," he explained. "Even when it's quiet, it's never this quiet." She stepped closer, her gaze focusing on the display. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then faintly, so faintly Cal almost missed it, the sensors picked up something. A signal. No, not a signal. Multiple. Approaching. Fast. Kyle leaned in, adjusting the settings. Well, he said slowly, that's new. The readings sharpened. Large objects, too large, moving in perfect formation. Zara's posture changed instantly. Her shoulders straightened, her expression tightening in a way Kael had never seen before. Not fear, recognition. Kael glanced at her. You know what that is, he said. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes remained fixed on the display, on the approaching shapes that were now becoming impossible to ignore. Yes, she said quietly. Kael exhaled through his nose. I was hoping you'd say no, he admitted. The signal intensified, filling the panel with data that Kael's systems struggled to process. Whoever, or whatever, was arriving. They were not small, and they were not lost. Zara took a step back. Kael noticed. He looked at her, then back at the display. Then very calmly he said, I'm starting to think your far calling just got significantly closer. Zara didn't argue. She just stood there very still as the first shadow passed over the colony. The shadow did not pass quickly. It lingered, stretching across the colony like something that had decided the sky belonged to it now. Kael stood in the doorway, one hand resting lightly against the frame, as if the structure itself might offer an explanation. It did not. Above them, the first ship descended into view, not rushing, not aggressive, but deliberate in a way that felt far more unsettling. Its surface gleamed with smooth, seamless plating, etched with symbols that seemed to shift slightly when you tried to focus on them too long. It was not built like anything Kael had seen before, not patched together, not functional in the usual sense. It was designed. Well, Kael said after a moment, that's definitely not a delivery ship. Zara stood beside him, very still. He glanced at her. I'm assuming this is related to you, he added. She did not deny it. The air changed next, not physically, not in any way Kael could measure. But there was a tension now, a quiet pressure that settled into everything. The usual distant noises of the colony had disappeared completely, replaced by a silence that felt organized. Then came the second ship, and the third. Kael let out a slow breath. You didn't mention you had friends, he said. Zara's gaze remained fixed on the sky. Not friends, she said. Kael nodded once. That's worse. The ships held position above the colony, their formation precise, their presence impossible to ignore. Then, as if following a signal only they could hear, smaller crafts detached from the main vessels, descending in controlled, silent arcs. Kael watched them carefully. All right, he said, so this is either a very formal visit or the beginning of a problem I am not qualified to fix. Zara stepped forward slightly. Kael noticed immediately. No, he said, gently but firmly. We are not walking toward the large, unknown, highly organized group of armed individuals. That's not something we do. She didn't stop. He sighed. Of course you don't listen. The first landing craft touched down at the far end of the colony, its surface shifting as it settled into place. A faint line of light traced along its edge before the structure opened. Figures emerged. Tall, precise, armored in a way that suggested both function and ceremony. Their movements were synchronized, controlled, as if each step had been decided long before they took it. Kael crossed his arms. They look important, he said. I don't like important people. They usually expect things. Zara's posture straightened. It was subtle but unmistakable. The quiet, observant presence Kael had grown used to shifted into something else. Something more structured, more deliberate. He glanced at her. You're doing that thing again, he said. She didn't look at him. They're coming here, she said. Kael followed her gaze. The soldiers, because that was clearly what they were, had begun moving through the colony with purpose, not searching randomly, not hesitating. They were coming directly toward them. Kael exhaled slowly. That feels personal, he said. Zara took a small step forward. He immediately reached out, lightly catching her arm. Let's pause, he said. Just briefly, before we commit to whatever this is. She looked at him. For a moment, the tension in her expression softened. Then she gently pulled free. They know, she said. Kael blinked. No what? She hesitated. Then quietly she answered, Me. Kyle stared at her. Then he looked back at the approaching figures, then back at her again. Of course they do, he said. Why wouldn't they? That would be too simple. The soldiers reached the edge of his property and stopped, not hesitating, not uncertain, waiting. Kyle shifted his weight slightly. All right, he said under his breath. This is the part where someone says something dramatic. As if on cue, one of the figures stepped forward. Their armor was more detailed than the others, marked with intricate patterns that seemed to carry meaning Kael couldn't begin to interpret. The helmet retracted smoothly, revealing a face that looked almost human, except for the same long, elegant ears. Kael glanced sideways at Zara. I'm noticing a pattern, he said. The figure's gaze settled on her. There was no doubt in it, no hesitation, no need to confirm. They knew exactly who they were looking at. The soldier placed a hand over their chest, lowering their head slightly in a gesture that was clearly not meant for Kael. Princess Zara, they said. The words hung in the air. Kyle did not react immediately. He blinked once, twice. Then he looked at Zara. I'm sorry, he said calmly. I think I misheard that. Zara did not speak. She did not move. But something in her expression changed, something that confirmed everything without needing words. Cal let out a slow breath. Princess, he repeated, testing the word like it might break if handled incorrectly. You're a princess. He looked back at the soldier, then back at Zara, then up at the massive ship still hanging in the sky. And that explains absolutely nothing, he added. The soldier straightened, their expression composed but carrying a weight that Kael could feel even from where he stood. You have been missing, the soldier continued. The Empire has searched. Yes, Kael interrupted, raising a hand. I'm going to stop you there. The soldier paused, clearly not accustomed to being interrupted. Kael gestured toward Zara. You're telling me that for the past 3 years, I have been living with a missing princess, he said, and no one thought to mention this sooner? The soldier looked at him. There was a brief moment of silence. Then very carefully they said, We did not know she was here. Kael nodded slowly. Right, of course. That would be too efficient. Zara finally moved. Just a step. But it was enough. The soldiers reacted instantly, their postures shifting, their attention sharpening. Not out of fear, but out of respect. Kyle noticed that. He looked at her again, really looked this time, at the way she stood, at the quiet authority in her presence, at the parts of her he had ignored, dismissed, or simply never questioned. You could have told me, he said. Zara turned her head slightly. Her eyes met his. For a moment, the distance between who she was and who she had been seemed to disappear. I stayed, she said softly. Kyle held her gaze. Then he exhaled, shaking his head slightly. Yes, he said, you did. Behind her, the soldiers waited. Above them, the ships remained. And for the first time since he had found her outside his door, Kyle realized that the quiet, manageable problem he had taken into his home was never small to begin with. No one moved for a long moment, as if the entire colony had agreed to wait and see what Kyle would do next, which was deeply unfair, because Kael had absolutely no idea what he was supposed to do next. He looked at Zara, then at the soldier, then back at Zara again. Princess, he said slowly, still testing the word like it might suddenly reject him. I feel like this is information that should have come up earlier, preferably before I let you reorganize my tools. Zara didn't respond. That at least was consistent. The soldier stepped forward again, posture precise, voice controlled. Your Highness, we must return immediately. The situation is complicated, Kael offered. The soldier glanced at him, just briefly. Critical, they corrected. Kael nodded. That was my second guess. Zara remained where she was, standing between them. The faint glow beneath her skin had returned. Not unstable, not flickering, but steady, like something that had finally remembered what it was supposed to be. Kael noticed. He noticed everything now. That thing you do, he said, gesturing lightly toward her. The glowing? I'm assuming that's not something you picked up from my tea. Zara shook her head. Right, he said. Of course not. The soldier took another step forward, their tone tightening slightly. Your Highness, we have limited time. The fleet cannot remain here without... Zara lifted her hand. The soldier stopped instantly. Kael blinked. That's effective, he said. Zara turned slightly, her gaze shifting between the two of them. There was a weight in her expression now, something heavier than anything Kael had seen before. Not confusion, not uncertainty, responsibility. Kael shifted his stance, suddenly feeling like he was standing in the middle of something much larger than he had agreed to participate in. I'm getting the sense this isn't just a polite invitation, he said. No, Zara replied quietly. The soldier inclined their head. The Empire requires your presence. There are matters that cannot be resolved in your absence. Kael folded his arms. That sounds ominous, he said. I don't like ominous. Ominous usually leads to explosions. Zara glanced at him. Not always, she said. Kael raised an eyebrow. You're saying there's a chance it doesn't lead to explosions? She hesitated. Small chance. He nodded. I appreciate the honesty. The air shifted again as another craft descended, this one larger, its structure unfolding in layered segments that aligned with precise mechanical grace. A ramp extended, connecting it to the ground with a soft, almost respectful hum. Kael stared at it. That's definitely for you, he said. No one builds something like that for casual visits. Zara didn't deny it. The soldiers stepped aside slightly, creating a clear path toward the ramp. We are ready, they said. Kael watched the scene unfold, his mind working through the situation with the same methodical logic he applied to everything else. Problem, variables, outcome. Except this time, none of it fit into anything he understood. He looked at Zara again. 3 years. 3 years of quiet routines, small conversations, shared space. 3 years of not knowing. So that's it, he said. You just leave? Zara didn't answer immediately. Her gaze moved past him, toward the doorway of his home, the open space, the familiar clutter, the place where nothing ever happened until it did. Then she looked back at him. There was something in her eyes now, something that hadn't been there before. Conflict. I have to go, she said. Kael nodded once, slowly. Yes, he said. That part I understand. He gestured toward the ships, the soldiers, the entire overwhelming situation. You've got an empire waiting. That seems important. She took a step toward him, then stopped. Kael watched her carefully, his usual dry expression softer now, though he clearly wasn't going to admit that to anyone, including himself. You stayed, he said, quieter this time. Zara's fingers curled slightly at her side. I chose, she replied. Kael let out a small breath, almost a laugh, though there was nothing particularly amusing about it. That's worse, he said. If it was an accident, I could blame the universe. This means I have to blame you. Zara tilted her head slightly. For a moment, the tension eased. Just a little. Then the soldier spoke again, more firmly this time. Your Highness. Zara's posture shifted. Kael saw it happen, the moment where the quiet girl in his home became something else again. Something larger, something that didn't fit inside these walls. She turned, took a step toward the ramp. Kael didn't move, didn't speak. He just watched, because that was the logical thing to do. Because there was no reason to stop her. Because Zara stopped, halfway to the ship. The soldiers tensed, uncertain for the first time. Kael blinked. All right, he said slowly. That's new. Zara turned back. Not fully, just enough. Her gaze found him again, and this time, there was no distance in it, no hesitation. Kael, she said. He straightened slightly. Yes? She took a step back toward him. The soldiers shifted, clearly not expecting this. Come, she said. Kael stared at her, then at the ship, then back at her again. Come where? He asked. Zara didn't look away. With me. Kael blinked once, twice. Then he let out a slow breath, running a hand through his hair. You're inviting me, he said carefully, to leave my perfectly stable, completely predictable life, and join you on that. He pointed at the ship. Zara nodded. Kael looked at the ship again. That's a very large that, he said. She waited. Kyle exhaled, glancing back at his home. The tools, the systems, the quiet order he had spent years maintaining. Then he looked at her, at the person who had quietly rearranged all of it without asking. This is a bad idea, he said. Zara didn't argue. He nodded once. Yes, he said. Definitely a bad idea. A pause, then, with the same calm certainty he used when dealing with broken systems that made no sense. All right, Kyle said. I'll come. The soldiers froze. Zara didn't smile, but something in her expression shifted, just enough. And for the second time in his life, Kyle stepped into a situation he didn't understand at all. Only this time, it wasn't alone. The interior of the ship did not feel like a machine. That was the first thing Cal noticed, and he did not like it. Machines were supposed to make sense. They had clear structures, visible seams, components you could trace and understand. This place didn't. The walls curved too smoothly, the light shifted without a visible source, and the air itself carried a faint hum that felt almost aware of his presence. Kyle walked a few steps forward, looking around carefully. I don't see any panels, he said, or wiring, or anything that looks like it could catastrophically fail, which is concerning because everything fails eventually. Zara moved beside him with quiet familiarity, as if she had walked these halls before, which Cal reminded himself she probably had. Not built like yours, she said. That's unfortunate, Kyle replied. I prefer things I can take apart. A group of soldiers passed by, their movements precise, their attention briefly shifting towards Zara before they lowered their heads in silent acknowledgement. None of them acknowledged Kael. He noticed that immediately. I'm being ignored, he said. Zara glanced at him. Yes, Kael nodded slowly. I'm not used to that, he said. It's unsettling. They moved deeper into the ship, the structure opening into a vast chamber that overlooked the stars. Massive transparent panels revealed the fleet outside, stretching endlessly, each ship aligned in perfect formation. Cal stopped walking. That's excessive, he said quietly. Zara followed his gaze. Necessary, she replied. Cal folded his arms. That word usually just means, we built too many of them, and now we need a reason. Zara almost smiled. The doors at the far end of the chamber opened. Figures entered, taller, more elaborately dressed, their presence heavier than the soldiers outside. Their clothing carried the same shifting patterns as the ship's, symbols layered in ways Kael couldn't begin to decode. Authority, not the kind you argued with. Kael leaned slightly toward Zara. I'm guessing these are the people I'm supposed to pretend not to offend, he murmured. Zara didn't answer. She stepped forward, and in that moment, Kael saw it fully. The shift, not gradual, not subtle, complete. The quiet girl who had stood in his home, who had handed him tools and watched him work, who had learned how to make tea and fix things in her own strange way. That version of her didn't disappear, but it moved aside, and something else stood in its place. Zara straightened, her posture flawless, her presence commanding, in a way that changed the entire room without a single word. The faint glow beneath her skin deepened, not brighter, but more defined, as if it had found its true form. The figures stopped. They bowed. Kael blinked. All right, he whispered. That's new. One of them stepped forward, their voice steady. Your Highness, the council awaits your command. Kael glanced at Zara, then at the council, then back at Zara again. You have a council, he said quietly. Of course you do. Zara didn't look at him. Her gaze remained forward, her expression calm but firm. No, she said. The word echoed slightly in the chamber. The council did not move. Kael's eyebrows lifted. That sounded familiar, he murmured. The figure hesitated. Your Highness? Zara took a step forward. I return, she said, her voice clear, controlled, carrying far beyond the room. But not alone. Kael felt several sets of eyes turn toward him. He straightened instinctively, then immediately regretted it. I don't think I'm dressed for this, he muttered. The silence deepened. The council studied him. Kael resisted the urge to wave. He stays, Zara continued. The statement landed with weight. The figure in front of her hesitated again, just for a moment. Your Highness, this is unusual. Kael nodded. I agree, he said. Very unusual. I also have no idea what's happening. Zara turned her head slightly. Her eyes met his. For a brief moment, the distance vanished again. Kael fixes, she said. He blinked. That's your argument? She nodded. Kael looked back at the council. In my defense, he added, I do fix things. The silence stretched. Then slowly, something shifted. Not in the room, in Zara. She stepped closer to him, not as a ruler, not as a symbol, but as herself. I choose, she said. The words were simple, but they carried everything. The council lowered their heads again, not in hesitation this time, in acceptance. Kael exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing just slightly. That was easier than I expected, he admitted. I was preparing for at least one dramatic disagreement. Zara tilted her head. Later, he nodded. That's fair. The chamber began to move again, the stillness breaking as the ship adjusted course. Outside, the fleet shifted, aligning towards something distant, something vast, a future. Kael stepped forward, standing beside Zara as he looked out at the stars. For a moment, he said nothing. Then quietly, you knew this would happen, he said. Zara didn't deny it. You stayed anyway, he added. She nodded once. Kael let out a small breath, something softer than his usual tone. That was a bad decision, he said. Zara looked at him. Yes, he smiled slightly. Good, he said. I'm starting to think I make those too. She didn't smile, not fully, but her eyes softened, and that was enough. The ship moved forward, the stars shifting as the fleet carried them into something new. Something neither of them had planned, but both had chosen. Kael folded his arms, watching the endless stretch of space ahead. All right, he said after a moment. If I'm staying, I have one condition. Zara glanced at him. What? He gestured vaguely at the walls. At some point, you're going to have to show me how this place works. She considered that. Then simply, yes. Kael nodded, satisfied. Good, he said, because I'm definitely going to take something apart. And this time, when Zara looked at him, she smiled,